The massive space station Kepler Prime hung in the darkness between stars like a silver flower. Its arms stretched out in all directions, each one holding docking bays for different species. Ships of every shape and size floated near the station. Some looked like metal birds with glowing wings. Others were round like bubbles made of crystal. A few were so strange that they hurt to look at directly. Commander Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the small window of her transport ship. She had never seen so many alien vessels in one place. Her own ship was tiny compared to most of them. It was built on Earth using simple metal and basic engines. Next to the other ships, it looked like a child's toy. "Not very impressive, are we?" said Captain Morrison, the pilot of their transport. He was also looking at the alien ships with worry in his eyes. Elena did not answer right away. She was busy counting the ships and noting their designs. Some had weapons that glowed with energy. Others had armor that seemed to shift and change color. She pulled out a small notebook and started writing down what she saw. "Impressive enough," she finally said. "We're here, aren't we?" The docking process took 2 hours. Elena watched as alien workers guided their ship into a bay designed for smaller vessels. The workers wore environment suits that let them breathe in space. Some had 4 arms. Others floated without any legs at all. Elena made notes about everything. When they finally entered the station, Elena felt the artificial gravity pull her down. The air smelled clean but strange, like metal and electricity. The hallways were huge, built to fit beings much larger than humans. Elena had to crane her neck to see the ceiling. "This way to the council chamber," said their guide. It was a robot that spoke in perfect English. The robot was taller than Elena and moved on wheels instead of legs. "Please follow the blue lights on the floor." They walked through corridors filled with aliens of every type. Elena saw beings made of rock who left small pebbles behind as they moved. There were creatures that looked like they were made of liquid metal. Some aliens had so many eyes that Elena lost count. Others had no eyes at all, but seemed to see everything perfectly. Most of the aliens ignored the small group of humans. A few stared at them with curiosity. Elena heard one group of insect-like beings making clicking sounds that their translator devices turned into words. Such small things. How did they even get here? Elena kept writing in her notebook. She noted how each species moved, what they wore, and how they treated other aliens. She was especially interested in which species seemed to respect each other and which ones kept their distance. The council chamber was enormous. It was shaped like a bowl, with seats arranged in circles going down toward the center. Each section was designed for different types of beings. Some seats were filled with water for fish-like aliens. Others had special atmosphere bubbles for species that breathed different gases. Elena and her 2 companions were shown to a small section near the top. Their seats were basic metal chairs that looked like they had been added as an afterthought. Elena did not mind. From here, she could see and hear everything that happened below. "Welcome, beings of the galaxy," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We gather today to face our greatest threat. The void swarm approaches our systems. We must unite or perish." Elena looked around the chamber as representatives from 12 major species began to speak. Each one stood in their section and gave speeches about their military might. First came the Zephyrians. They were tall, blue-skinned beings with silver markings on their faces. Admiral Korth stood with his arms spread wide. "The Zephyrian Empire commands 300 dreadnought vessels," he announced. "Our plasma cannons can melt through solid metal like it was ice. Our shields have never been broken in battle." The crowd made sounds of approval. Elena wrote down the numbers and specifications that Admiral Korth mentioned. She also noted that he seemed very proud, maybe too proud. Next came the Nexari. They looked like living crystals that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. Their representative's voice sounded like musical notes. "The Nexari Collective brings harmonic disruptors that shatter enemy holes at the molecular level. Our crystal ships repair themselves during battle. We have defended our space for 10,000 years without a single defeat." More sounds of approval echoed through the chamber. Elena noticed that the Nexari representative did not give exact numbers of ships. She wrote down a question mark next to their name. The Thorak were next. They were massive bear-like creatures covered in thick fur and metal armor. Their commander, General Grimjaw, slammed his metal fist on the speaking platform. "Thorak warriors fear nothing. Our battleships carry the biggest guns in the galaxy. We ram enemy ships and board them with axes and guns. Void swarm bugs will learn to fear thorax steel. The cheering was louder this time. Elena observed that many species seemed impressed by the thorax directness. She wrote down that they preferred close combat and ramming tactics. Each species took their turn. The ethereal collective spoke of energy beings that could possess enemy ships. The Hive Confederation described their swarm tactics using millions of small fighter craft. The Mechanical Union announced their robot fleets that felt no fear or pain. As each representative spoke, Elena noticed patterns. Every species was very proud of their technology and their victories. They all spoke about their enemies as if they were already defeated. Many of them looked down on the other species in the chamber. When it came time for humanity to speak, Elena stood up slowly. The chamber, which had been full of noise and energy, suddenly became quiet. All eyes turned to the small human section near the top of the bowl. Elena walked down to the speaking platform in the center. She looked very small compared to the beings around her. Her uniform was plain gray with simple rank markings. She carried only her small notebook and a basic data pad. "I am Commander Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Fleet," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Humanity offers 12 destroyer-class vessels to the United Fleet." The silence stretched on. Elena could hear some aliens making sounds that her translator turned into whispers. 12 ships. That's all. Why are they even here? Admiral Kor of the Zephyrian spoke up. "Commander, did you say 12 ships? The Zephyrian Empire alone brings 300 dreadnoughts. What can 12 small ships possibly contribute to this battle?" Elena looked at him calmly. "Our ships are equipped with kinetic weapons, fusion drives, and basic defensive systems. We also have detailed sensor equipment for reconnaissance and data gathering." A sound came from the Nexari section that the translator rendered as laughter. "Kinetic weapons? You mean you throw rocks at your enemies?" "Essentially, yes," Elena replied without any embarrassment. "High-velocity projectiles have proven effective in our limited combat experience." The laughter spread through the chamber. Elena noticed which species laughed the loudest and which ones remained quiet. She wrote this information in her notebook. General Grimjaw of the Thorax stood up. "Little human, your weapons are ancient. Even we Thorax stopped using simple projectiles centuries ago. How did your people survive long enough to reach the stars?" "Carefully," Elena answered. "We study our enemies. We plan our battles. We use what works. And what works against beings that adapt their biology during combat?" asked the ethereal representative. "The Void Swarm learns from every weapon used against them. They evolve defenses faster than we can develop new attacks." Elena was quiet for a moment. "That is indeed a challenge. May I ask what specific adaptations have been observed?" For the next hour, Elena asked questions. She wanted to know about swarm ship designs, their attack patterns, their reproduction rates, and their resource needs. She asked about previous battles and what weapons had failed. She asked about their communication methods and whether they had ever retreated from a fight. Most representatives answered her questions, though many seemed annoyed by her constant note-taking. Admiral Kor eventually said, "Commander, you ask many questions, but offer few answers. What is humanity's strategy for defeating this threat?" Elena closed her notebook. "At this time, we are still gathering information. Humanity will support the United Fleet in whatever capacity is deemed appropriate." Appropriate. The Nexari representative's crystal form flashed with different colors. "With 12 primitive ships, you will be lucky to serve as target practice for our real warships." Elena nodded politely. "We understand our limitations. However, we have found that even small contributions can be valuable when properly applied." The discussion moved on to fleet formations and battle tactics. Elena listened carefully as each species described their preferred combat methods. The Zephyrians liked long-range energy battles. The Nexari used coordinated harmonic attacks. The Thorax charged directly at enemies. The ethereal beings tried to possess and control enemy vessels. Elena noticed that every species had a standard way of fighting. They all had tactics that had worked for them in the past. They all expected the Void Swarm to fight like previous enemies they had defeated. As the meeting continued into its 6th hour, Elena observed the politics between species. The Zephyrians and Nexari clearly considered themselves the most advanced. The Thorax respected strength above all. To be respected, Don't you want them to take us seriously? Elena closed her notebook and looked around the chamber. Most of the aliens had left, but she could still hear their voices echoing from the corridors outside. They were all talking about their great fleets and their powerful weapons. Morrison, what do you see when you look at this place? The captain looked around. A lot of very advanced aliens, with very powerful weapons, who think we're primitive idiots. I see 12 species who have never lost a major war, Elena said quietly. 12 species who are so confident in their superiority that they can't imagine being defeated. 12 species who just spent 6 hours telling everyone exactly how their fleets fight, what their weapons do, and what their weaknesses are. Morrison frowned. What do you mean, weaknesses? Elena started walking toward the exit. The Zephyrin's plasma weapons require enormous energy generation. That means big reactors that produce heat signatures. The Nexari's harmonic weapons depend on crystal resonance frequencies, disrupt the frequency, and the weapons become useless. The Thorac charge directly at enemies, which makes their movement predictable. But Elena, the Void Swarm adapts to everything. Even if we know their weaknesses, the swarm will just evolve counters. Elena stopped walking and looked at Morrison. The swarm adapts to weapons and tactics they've seen before. But what if we use something they've never encountered? Something so simple and basic that there's no complex system to adapt to. They walked through the corridors of Kepler Prime in silence. Elena continued to observe everything around her. She watched how the different species moved and interacted. She noted which technologies they all seemed to take for granted. As they reached their docking bay, Elena saw their small human transport ship sitting next to a massive Zeparian dreadnought. The alien ship was covered in energy weapons and shield generators. It hummed with barely contained power. Their ship looked like a metal box with simple chemical rockets attached. Elena, Morrison said quietly, what are you planning? Elena looked at their ship for a long moment. I'm planning to do what humans do best, Morrison. I'm planning to survive. As they boarded their transport, Elena opened her notebook one more time. She had filled dozens of pages with observations, specifications, and tactical notes. At the bottom of the last page, she wrote a single word: patience. The transport ship undocked from Kepler Prime and began its journey back to human space. Elena watched through the window as the massive station grew smaller. Soon, it was just another point of light among the stars. In 3 weeks, the United Galactic Fleet would meet the Void Swarm in battle. 12 species would bring their most advanced weapons and their finest warriors. They would fight with energy and exotic matter and technologies that humanity could barely understand. And they would learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who says the least. 3 weeks after the meeting at Kepler Prime, the largest fleet in galactic history gathered at the edge of the Terminus Nebula. Ships from 12 different species formed a massive formation that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. The combined fleet numbered over 2,000 vessels, from massive dreadnoughts to swift fighters. Elena stood on the bridge of the TDF Endurance, her flagship, and one of only 12 human ships in the entire armada. Through the main view screen, she could see the immense Zaharian dreadnoughts floating in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed with energy shields, and weapon ports glowed with barely contained plasma. Contact from Fleet Command, reported Lieutenant Chen from the communications station. Admiral Kor is assigning battle positions. Elena nodded. Put it through. Admiral Korth's blue face appeared on the screen. His silver markings seemed brighter than Elena remembered, probably due to excitement about the coming battle. Commander Vasquez, your reconnaissance group will maintain position 30,000 kilometers behind the main battle line. Your mission is to observe and report on swarm movements. Understood, Admiral. What intelligence do we have on enemy numbers? Our long-range sensors detect approximately 800 swarm bioships approaching from the nebula's core. They will arrive in 6 hours. Koreth's expression showed confidence. The combined might of the galactic fleet will crush them quickly. Ella made notes on her datapad. Admiral, have there been any changes to swarm tactics since the last encounter? Koreth waved a hand dismissively. The swarm insects, Commander. They have no tactics beyond swarming and consuming. Our superior technology will prevail as it always has. The communication ended. Elena turned to her small crew. The bridge of the Endurance was cramped compared to the alien ships, but every station was occupied by a competent officer. These men and women represented the best that humanity had to offer. Captain Morrison, bring us to the assigned position. Maintain full sensor sweeps and prepare all data recording systems. Elena, Morrison said quietly, are we really just going to watch? Our weapons might not be fancy, but we could help. Elena looked at the tactical display showing the massive fleet formation. Morrison, what do you see? Morrison studied the display. A lot of firepower arranged in a standard battle line. The Zephyrians in the center with their big guns. Nexari crystal ships on the flanks for mobility. Thorak battleships ready to charge. The smaller species providing support. And what don't you see? Morrison was quiet for a moment. I don't see any backup plans. Everyone is committed to one big battle. If the main line breaks, then everything falls apart. Elena finished. The Galactic Fleet is fighting like this. Is a traditional engagement between conventional forces, but the Void Swarm isn't conventional. Lieutenant Chen called out from her station. Commander, long-range sensors are picking up movement in the nebula. The swarm is approaching faster than expected. Elena studied the sensor data. The Void Swarm ships were unlike anything in the Galactic Fleet. Instead of metal hulls and mechanical systems, they were alive. Each bioship grew and changed as it moved. Some looked like massive insects with wings of hardened carapace. Others resembled sea creatures with tentacles and organic weapons. All ships. This is Admiral Korth. The fleet commander's voice echoed across communication channels. Swarm vessels detected. All units, prepare for combat. Remember, we fight for the future of galactic civilization. Elena watched as the great ships of the fleet powered up their weapons. The Zephyrian dreadnoughts began charging their plasma cannons. The Nexari crystal ships started generating harmonic frequencies. The Thorak battleships moved forward, eager for close combat. Elena, Morrison whispered, they're beautiful. He was right. The combined fleet was an impressive sight. Weapons of incredible power hummed with energy. Shields shimmered around massive hulls. The formation was precise and organized. It represented the combined military might of 12 advanced civilizations. Elena pulled out her notebook and started writing. She documented the fleet formation, weapon signatures, and tactical arrangements. But she also wrote down something else. Every species was fighting exactly as they had described at Kepler Prime. There were no surprises, no hidden strategies, no unexpected tactics. The Void Swarm emerged from the nebula like a plague of locusts. Their bioships moved in seemingly random patterns. But Elena noticed there was organization underneath the chaos. Groups of smaller ships protected larger ones. Fast attackers probed the fleet formation while heavy bioships hung back. First contact in 10 minutes, reported Lieutenant Chen. Swarm ships are spreading into attack formation. Admiral Korth's voice filled the communication channels again. All ships open fire when targets enter a range. Show these creatures that a power of civilized species. The battle began with a spectacular display of firepower. Plasma beams lanced out from the Zephyrian ships, striking swarm bioships and burning through their organic hulls. The Nexari crystal vessels fired harmonic pulses that shattered smaller attackers. Thorak guns launched massive projectiles that smashed into bioship formations. For the first few minutes, it looked like the Galactic Fleet would achieve easy victory. Swarm ships exploded or drifted away damaged. The organized formations of the fleet maintained their discipline while cutting through enemy ranks. Then, something changed. Elena, Morrison said with concern in his voice, look at the sensor readings from the damaged swarm ships. Elena studied the data. The bioships that had been hit by plasma weapons were not just repairing themselves, they were changing. Their hulls were growing thicker and developing reflective surfaces. Some were beginning to absorb plasma energy instead of being damaged by it. Lieutenant Chen, are you getting the same readings? Yes, Commander. The swarm ships are adapting. They're developing immunity to energy weapons in real time. Elena opened a communication channel to Fleet Command. Admiral Kor, this is Commander Vasquez. Sensor data indicates swarm bioships are adapting to plasma weapons. Recommend immediate tactical adjustment. Vasquez, maintain your position. Kor replied curtly. A few lucky survivors do not change the battle's outcome. But Elena could see that it was more than a few survivors. Across the battlefield, swarm bioships were beginning to shrug off weapons that had destroyed them minutes earlier. The plasma beams from Zephyran dreadnoughts were having less and less effect. The Nexari tried to compensate by adjusting their harmonic frequencies. For a brief time, this worked. Swarm ships that had begun to resist plasma were shattered by the new harmonic patterns. But within minutes, the bioships adapted to those frequencies as well. "Commander," Lieutenant Chen called out. "Multiple bioships are approaching the Nexari formation. They're not taking damage from the harmonic disruptors anymore." Elena watched in fascination and horror as the swarm's adaptation abilities exceeded every prediction. Bioships that had been vulnerable to specific weapons were now completely immune. More concerning, they were beginning to copy the weapons used against them. A group of swarm attackers fired beams of energy that looked exactly like Zaharian plasma. Another group released harmonic pulses similar to Nexari weapons. The bioships had not just adapted to resist the Galactic Fleet weapons. They had learned to use them. Elena Morrison said grimly, "This is getting bad fast." The organized formation of the Galactic Fleet was beginning to break down. Ships that had expected their weapons to work found themselves facing enemies immune to their attacks. Worse, those same enemies were now firing back with copied versions of their own weapons. The Thorak, true to their nature, responded by charging directly at the swarm ships. Their strategy was simple. If energy weapons weren't working, they would ram the bioships and board them for close combat. It was a disaster. The swarm bioships were waiting for them. As the Thorak battleships approached, the bioships suddenly sprouted additional armor and defensive spines. Some actually opened up to engulf the charging Thorak vessels. Elena watched in shock as entire battleships disappeared inside massive bioships that then sealed themselves shut. "Contact from General Grimjaw," Chen reported. The Thorak commander's voice was filled with rage and disbelief. "All ships. The bugs are eating our vessels. They're taking our ships apart from the inside." Elena could see the truth on her sensors. The bioships weren't just consuming the Thorak battleships. They were learning from them. New swarm vessels were emerging with armor plating similar to Thorak designs, and weapons that fired solid projectiles like Thorak guns. "Admiral Kor," Elena tried again. "The swarm is not just adapting to our weapons. They're incorporating our technology and tactics. Recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup." "Negative." Koreth's voice was strained. "All ships increase firepower. We can overwhelm their adaptation with sheer force." But Elena could see that wasn't working. The more weapons the Galactic Fleet used, the faster the swarm adapted. Every new tactic was copied and improved upon. Every technological advantage was neutralized within minutes. The ethereal collective tried to possess swarm bioships, but the creature's alien biology was too different. The energy beings found themselves trapped inside hostile organic systems that began to drain their life force. The Hive Confederation launched swarms of small fighters, but the swarm's bioships simply opened their hulls and absorbed the attacking craft, adding their technology to their own rapidly evolving designs. "Elena," Morrison said quietly, "we have to do something." Elena was still taking notes, still recording everything she saw. The defeat of the Galactic Fleet was providing an incredible amount of data about swarm capabilities. She was learning how they adapted, how quickly they could change, and what their limitations might be. "Commander," Chen called out, "Admiral Kor is ordering a general retreat. All ships are to withdraw immediately." Elena looked at the tactical display. The magnificent Galactic Fleet was falling apart. Ships were breaking formation and fleeing in all directions. The Zephyran dreadnoughts were pulling back with their plasma weapons useless. The Nexari crystal ships were shattering as the swarm used improved harmonic weapons against them. "Admiral Korth, this is Commander Vasquez," Elena said over the communication channel. "Request permission to engage the swarm pursuit forces." "Vasquez, get your ships out of there." Kor's voice was filled with panic. "Your primitive weapons won't even scratch them." But Elena was not looking at retreat options. She was studying the pursuing swarm biohips on her sensors. They had adapted to energy weapons, harmonic disruptors, and conventional projectiles. They had learned to counter shields, overcome armor, and resist exotic matter weapons. But they had never encountered humanity's particular approach to warfare. "All human ships, this is Commander Vasquez," Elena said calmly. Move to intercept swarm pursuit vector. Prepare kinetic kill vehicles for deployment. Elena, Morrison protested. Those are weapons of last resort. We only have a few dozen of them. Elena watched as the fleeing galactic fleet scattered in. Panic. Behind them, the swarm bioships were giving chase, picking off stragglers, and learning from every ship they consumed. The creatures were becoming more dangerous with each passing minute. Morrison, what do you think will happen if the swarm reaches the core worlds? Morrison was quiet for a moment. They'll adapt to every defense. They'll consume everything. Every world, every species, every piece of technology will be absorbed and turned against us. Then we stop them here. Elena turned to address her small crew. Ladies and gentlemen, the galactic fleet has been defeated because they fought the swarm using methods the swarm could understand and adapt to. Every species used advanced technology, complex tactics, and predictable strategies. She looked around the bridge at the faces of her officers. But humanity has something the swarm has never encountered. We have the willingness to use simple, brutal solutions when complex ones fail. Today, we're going to teach the galaxy why humans survived long enough to reach the stars. Elena opened communication channels to all 12 human ships. All vessels, this is Vasquez. Lock onto my ship and follow my lead. We're going to do what humans do best. What's that, Commander? Asked Captain Rodriguez from the destroyer Defiance. Elena looked at the approaching swarm biohips. They were magnificent in their alien beauty. They represented millions of years of evolution and adaptation. They were perfect killing machines that could counter any strategy and overcome any weapon. We're going to be unpredictable, Elena said quietly. The 12 human ships turned away from the retreat route and moved directly toward the pursuing swarm. As they approached, Elena could see the bioships beginning to change and adapt. They were preparing for another encounter with conventional weapons. They were about to discover that humans had never been conventional. The last thing Admiral Kor heard before his ship jumped to hyperspace was Elena's calm voice over the communication channel. All human ships, weapons free. Let's show them what kinetic energy can do. In the darkness between stars, 12 small ships faced an enemy that had just defeated the greatest fleet in galactic history. The swarm bioships moved forward confidently. Their hulls already adapted to resist every known weapon. They had never faced weapons that were thousands of years old. They had never fought an enemy that preferred simple solutions to complex problems. They were about to learn why humanity had survived when so many other species had fallen. 6 months had passed since the disaster at Terminus Nebula. The Galactic Council had shattered like crystals struck by a hammer. Each species retreated to their home systems, desperately trying to prepare defenses against an enemy that adapted to everything they tried. The Zahirian Empire pulled back their fleets to protect their core worlds. Their plasma weapons, once the pride of their navy, were useless against biohips that absorbed energy attacks. Admiral Kor spent sleepless nights trying to develop new weapons, but every design seemed inadequate against an enemy that evolved faster than technology could advance. The Nexari Collective sealed themselves behind harmonic barriers, hoping their crystal technology could create frequencies the swarm couldn't copy, but intercepted communications from their border worlds told a different story. The swarm was learning to shatter their barriers using improved versions of their own harmonic weapons. The proud Thorak had lost half their fleet in suicidal ramming attacks that only fed more technology to the enemy. General Grimjaw sent desperate messages asking for assistance, but every species was fighting for survival. There was no help to give. In the depths of space, whispers spread through encrypted channels. Some suggested negotiating with the swarm. Others proposed abandoning the galaxy entirely and fleeing to distant star clusters. A few desperate voices called for using planet-killing weapons, sacrificing entire worlds to deny them to the enemy. But one voice was notably absent from these panicked communications. Humanity had gone completely silent. The last transmission from human space had come 3 months ago. A brief message from Commander Vasquez reporting that her ships had successfully delayed the swarm pursuit long enough for the galactic fleet to escape. After that, nothing. No distress calls, no requests for aid, no communication of any kind. Most species assumed the obvious. Earth was a single-system civilization with primitive technology. When the swarm reached Sol, humanity would have been consumed within days. The silence was just confirmation of what everyone expected. Poor creatures, Admiral Korth said to his staff during a briefing on Zephyr Prime. They fought bravely, but they never had a chance. At least their sacrifice bought us time to evacuate the core worlds. The Nexari Collective's response was more practical. Humanity's fate demonstrates the futility of resistance. The swarm cannot be stopped by conventional means. We must consider alternative solutions. Only a few beings wondered why the swarm had not emerged from human space to continue their expansion. Long-range sensors showed increased activity in the Sol system, but no swarm bioships had been detected leaving human territory. It was as if something had stopped them there, but nobody had time to investigate. The swarm was attacking on multiple fronts, consuming border worlds and learning from every defense. Each victory made them stronger and more adaptable. The galaxy was slowly being devoured. Deep in the Sol system, Commander Elena Vasquez floated in the observation deck of a massive construction facility hidden behind Jupiter's radiation shadow. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the largest industrial operation in human history. Thousands of ships moved between construction platforms that stretched for millions of kilometers. But these were not the sleek vessels of other species. They were simple, functional craft built from steel and ceramic composites. Their engines used chemical propulsion and basic fusion drives. Their hulls were thick metal, with no energy shields or exotic defenses. "Status report," Elena said to the holographic display that appeared beside her. "Construction proceeds on schedule," replied Dr. Sarah Chen, the project's chief scientist. Her face appeared in the hologram, looking tired but determined. "We've completed deployment of the primary grid. Secondary systems are at 80% completion." Elena nodded, making notes in a physical notebook. Even after months of preparation, she preferred old-fashioned paper to digital systems. "What about the kinetic kill vehicles?" "All 6,000 units are ready for deployment. Tungsten rods, 2 meters long, weighing 500 kilograms each. Simple fusion drives for acceleration. No electronics except basic guidance systems." "Warhead yield?" Dr. Chen smiled grimly. "No warheads, Commander, just mass and velocity. At relativistic speeds, each rod carries the kinetic energy of a nuclear weapon. The beauty is in the simplicity." Elena walked along the observation deck, looking out at humanity's secret weapon. It was not advanced technology or exotic matter. It was not energy weapons or adaptive systems. It was something much more basic, the willingness to think differently about warfare. While other species had tried to match the swarm's adaptability with increasingly complex weapons, humanity had gone in the opposite direction. They had built the simplest, most basic defense grid possible. No energy signatures for the swarm to adapt to. No complex systems to be analyzed and copied. Just metal, math, and physics. Commander called Captain Morrison from the command center. "We're receiving a transmission from the perimeter sensors. The swarm has finally decided to investigate our system." Elena had been waiting for this moment for months. The swarm had spent time digesting the technology they had captured at Terminus Nebula. They had absorbed the knowledge of 12 species and incorporated it into their bioships. Now they were confident enough to attack what they believed was a primitive, defenseless system. "Put the transmission on the main display," Elena ordered. The holographic display showed long-range sensor data from the edge of the Sol system. A massive formation of swarm bioships was approaching from the direction of Alpha Centauri. There were thousands of them, each one larger and more sophisticated than the creatures that had attacked the galactic fleet. These bioships incorporated technology from every species they had consumed. Some had the sleek lines of Zephyran dreadnoughts, but with organic hulls that pulsed with absorbed energy. Others resembled Nexari crystal ships, but made of living material that hummed with harmonic frequencies. A few showed the heavy armor and aggressive design of thorac battleships, adapted into biomechanical nightmares. "Analysis?" Elena asked. Dr. Chen pulled up detailed sensor readings. "They've definitely improved since Terminus Nebula. The bioships show technological integration from all 12 species. Energy weapons, harmonic disruptors, kinetic cannons, exotic matter systems. They have everything, and they're heading directly for Earth." "Yes, Commander. Current trajectory puts them at Earth orbit in 72 hours. No course corrections, no reconnaissance probes. They're treating this as a simple cleanup operation. Elena smiled for the first time in months. Perfect. They think we're already defeated. Morrison approached with a concerned expression. Elena, are you sure about this? Those ships are carrying the combined technology of the entire galactic fleet. Our defense grid is just tungsten rods and chemical explosives. Elena looked out at the construction platforms, where thousands of workers were making final preparations. Human engineers and technicians moved with calm efficiency, guided by plans that had taken months to develop. There was no panic, no desperate improvisation. Everything had been calculated and tested. Morrison, what's the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy? Morrison thought for a moment. The swarm's adaptation ability. They can counter any weapon system within minutes. Wrong. The most dangerous weapon is predictability. Every species fights the same way their ancestors did. They use the same tactics, the same strategies, the same thinking. The swarm adapts to them because they're all variations on familiar themes. Elena turned away from the window and walked toward the command center. But what if you face an enemy that doesn't follow the rules? What if you encounter weapons and tactics that are so simple, so primitive, that there's nothing complex to adapt to? The command center was a hub of quiet activity. Hundreds of technicians monitored displays showing the deployment of humanity's defense grid. Unlike the impressive bridge of an alien dreadnought, this center looked more like an industrial control room. The equipment was functional rather than elegant, built for reliability instead of appearance. All stations report status, Elena ordered. Kinetic kill vehicles deployed and ready, reported the weapons officer. All 6,000 units are in position throughout the system. Mining charges armed and in place, called out the demolitions chief. Chemical explosives positioned on asteroids, debris fields, and abandoned stations. Decoy systems active, announced the electronic warfare specialist. Fake energy signatures broadcasting from multiple locations. Elena walked to the main tactical display. It showed the Sol system as a three-dimensional map, filled with thousands of small icons. Each icon represented part of humanity's defense grid. But unlike the energy weapons and force fields of other species, these defenses were almost invisible. The kinetic kill vehicles were simple tungsten rods with basic guidance systems. They produced no energy signatures and were too small for most sensors to detect. The mining charges were chemical explosives hidden inside asteroids and space debris. The decoy systems used simple radio transmitters to create false targets. Elena Morrison said quietly, "What if this doesn't work? What if the swarm is too strong even for this?" Elena looked at her old friend. Morrison had been with her since the academy. He had seen her develop the strategies that kept humanity alive, while other species fell to various threats. He trusted her judgment, but she could see the worry in his eyes. "Morrison, do you remember our first combat mission? The pirate fleet near Titan?" Morrison smiled slightly. "You used the ice rings to hide our approach. Hit them with conventional missiles while they were looking for energy weapons. And what did you say afterward? That it was brilliant in its simplicity. The pirates had sensors designed to detect advanced ships, but our basic attack came from an angle they never expected." Elena nodded. "The swarm is like those pirates, but worse. They're so advanced, so adaptive, that they can only think in terms of complex systems. They've absorbed the technology of 12 species, but all those species think the same way." She pointed to the tactical display. "They're expecting energy shields, force fields, and exotic matter weapons. They're prepared to adapt to harmonic disruptors, plasma cannons, and quantum torpedoes, but they've never faced an enemy that uses thousand-year-old technology by choice." The hours passed slowly as the swarm fleet approached. Elena used the time to review her plans one final time. Every detail had been calculated based on months of studying the sensor data from Terminus Nebula. She knew how the bioships moved, how they adapted, and how they analyzed threats. Most importantly, she knew they were overconfident. Commander called out the sensor operator. "Swarm fleet is passing Neptune's orbit. Estimated arrival at Earth in 6 hours." Elena opened. "Communication channels to every human ship and station in the system. All units. This is Commander Vasquez. The enemy has entered our system. All personnel take positions for Operation Anvil." Throughout the Sol system, thousands of humans moved to their assigned posts. They were not in massive dreadnoughts or crystal ships. They were in simple vessels with chemical engines and metal hulls. Their weapons were basic kinetic projectiles and conventional explosives, but they had something the swarm had never encountered: the willingness to fight a primitive war against an advanced enemy. "Elena," Morrison said as alarms began sounding throughout the command center. "Any last-minute instructions?" Elena looked at the display showing the approaching swarm fleet. The bioships were magnificent in their alien beauty. They represented the combined knowledge of 13 species and millions of years of evolution. They were perfect killing machines adapted to counter every known weapon. "Just one," Elena said calmly. "Remember that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions." The swarm fleet crossed the asteroid belt and began its final approach to Earth. Long-range sensors showed the bioship spreading into attack formation. They were confident, unhurried, treating this as a simple extermination mission. Elena smiled as she watched them fall into her trap. "All units," she said quietly, "execute Operation Anvil." In the darkness of space, 6,000 tungsten rods began to accelerate. The Void Swarm fleet crossed into the inner Sol system like a plague of living ships. Each biovessel had grown larger and more complex since the battle at Terminus Nebula. Their hulls pulsed with absorbed energy from consumed civilizations. Weapon ports that had once belonged to Zaharian dreadnoughts now grew from organic flesh. Crystal formations stolen from Nexari ships glowed along their flanks. Commander Elena Vasquez watched from the command center, hidden behind Jupiter's radiation shadow. The tactical display showed over 3,000 swarm bioships approaching Earth in a formation that demonstrated their contempt for human defenses. They weren't even trying to be careful. "Target analysis complete," reported Dr. Chen from her sensor station. "The bioships have incorporated technology from all 12 species we observed at Terminus Nebula. Energy absorption capabilities, harmonic adaptation systems, regenerative armor. They're prepared for everything we're supposed to have." Elena nodded, making notes in her paper notebook. The swarm had spent months digesting the knowledge of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They had become the perfect predator, adapted to counter every weapon and tactic known to spacefaring species. Except they had never encountered a species that deliberately chose primitive weapons. "Morrison, what's our status on the grid?" Captain Morrison checked his console. "All kinetic kill vehicles are in position and ready. Chemical mining charges are armed throughout the asteroid field. Decoy transmitters are broadcasting false energy signatures from 17 different locations." Elena looked at the approaching swarm fleet. They were beautiful in their alien horror. Bioships that looked like metallic jellyfish floated alongside creatures resembling mechanical crabs. Some had absorbed so much technology that they were barely recognizable as living things. Others remained purely organic, their flesh adapted to resist every known weapon. Elena Morrison said quietly, "Are you sure tungsten rods can penetrate their adaptive armor?" Elena had asked herself the same question for months. The bioships had shown incredible defensive capabilities at Terminus Nebula. Their hulls could absorb energy weapons, resist harmonic attacks, and regenerate from conventional damage. But she had studied the sensor data carefully and found a crucial limitation. "The swarm adapts to complex systems," she explained. "They analyze weapon signatures, energy patterns, and technological principles. Then they evolve countermeasures, but adaptation requires understanding the threat." She pointed to the tactical display, showing the positions of her kinetic kill vehicles. "How do you adapt to a chunk of metal moving at relativistic speed? There's no complex system to analyze, no energy signature to counter. It's just mass and velocity." Dr. Chen looked up from her console. "Commander, the swarm fleet is beginning their approach to Earth. They're not even bothering with reconnaissance. This appears to be a standard consumption operation." Elena watched as the bioships moved into what she recognized as a feeding formation. Large consumer vessels positioned themselves to absorb planetary resources, while smaller attackers prepared to eliminate any resistance. It was the same pattern they had used on dozens of worlds. They expected no real opposition from humanity. "All stations, this is Commander Vasquez," Elena said over the communication system. "The enemy has entered our engagement zone. Execute Operation Anvil on my command." Throughout the Sol system, thousands of humans waited at their posts. They were not in advanced warships with exotic weapons. They were in simple spacecraft with chemical engines and basic life support. Their weapons were tungsten rods, chemical explosives, and conventional projectiles that would have been familiar to their ancestors. But they had spent months preparing for this moment. "Swarm fleet is passing Mars orbit," reported the sensor. "Operator, no course changes detected. They're heading directly for Earth." Elena opened a communication channel to Earth's Defense Command. "General Santos, are our people ready?" General Santos appeared on the screen, his weathered face calm despite the approaching threat. "All civilian populations are in deep shelters. Military units are standing by. The orbital platforms are prepared for immediate evacuation if necessary." Elena nodded. Earth's defenses were not designed to stop the swarm. They were designed to look like they were trying to stop the swarm. The real battle would be fought in the space between planets, using weapons the enemy had never encountered. "Swarm biohips are spreading into attack formation." Dr. Chen announced they're treating this as a routine operation. No special precautions detected. The bioships moved with practiced efficiency. Elena recognized their formation from intelligence, gathered during previous swarm attacks on other worlds. They would establish orbital dominance, eliminate resistance, and then begin the consumption process. It was a pattern they had perfected across the galaxy. Elena waited. Patience was humanity's greatest weapon, and she had learned to use it well. "Contact," the sensor operator called out. Earth's orbital platforms are engaging the swarm vanguard. On the tactical display, Elena watched as humanity's obvious defenses opened fire. Orbital weapon platforms shot conventional missiles and kinetic projectiles at the approaching bioships. The attacks were brave but futile, exactly what the poop swarm expected from a primitive species. The bioships absorbed the attacks with contemptuous ease. Their adaptive hulls neutralized the missile warheads and deflected the kinetic rounds. A few smaller bioships were damaged, but they immediately began regenerating, while their hulls adapted to resist further attacks. "Elena," Morrison said with concern, "they're not even slowing down." Elena watched as the swarm bioships destroyed Earth's orbital platforms with casual efficiency. The battle was going exactly as she had planned. The enemy was seeing what they expected to see: a weak civilization making a desperate last stand with obsolete weapons. They had no idea what was really waiting for them. "Swarm main body is approaching Earth orbit," reported Dr. Chen. "They're beginning consumption formation. Multiple bioships are extending feeding appendages toward the planet." Elena looked at her chronometer. The swarm fleet was now positioned exactly where she wanted them. Thousands of bioships were focused on Earth, their attention directed downward toward the planet they intended to consume. They were confident, relaxed, treating this as a simple harvesting operation. "All units," Elena said quietly. "Operation Anvil is now active. Engage at will." Throughout the Sol system, 6,000 tungsten rods began to accelerate. The kinetic kill vehicles had been positioned months earlier, hidden among asteroids and debris fields where no sensors would detect them. Each rod was 2 meters long and weighed 500 kilograms. Simple fusion drives accelerated them to significant fractions of light speed. There were no energy signatures for the swarm to detect, no complex weapon systems to analyze and counter, just chunks of metal moving very, very fast. The first impacts came without warning. A bioship that resembled a mechanical whale suddenly exploded as a tungsten rod punched through its hull at relativistic speed. The kinetic energy vaporized a 100-meter section of the creature's body before it could even begin to adapt. Then another bioship disintegrated as 2 rods struck it simultaneously from different angles. The impacts released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons, but there was no radiation signature for the swarm to trace. Within seconds, dozens of bioships were dying as tungsten rods slammed into them from every direction. The swarm formation, so confident moments before, suddenly found itself under attack from an invisible enemy. "Status report," Elena ordered. "First wave impact successful," reported the weapons officer. 67 confirmed kills. No enemy adaptation detected. Elena watched the tactical display as chaos spread through the swarm fleet. Bioships were trying to analyze the attacks, but there was nothing to analyze. The rods left no energy residue, no technological signature, no complex system for the swarm to understand and counter. The bioships began to change, trying to adapt to the threat. Their hulls grew thicker. Defensive spines emerged from their surfaces. Some developed multiple layers of armor, but adaptation required understanding the weapon, and there was nothing to understand about chunks of metal moving at high speed. Second wave. Fire, Elena commanded. Another 1,000 tungsten rods emerged from hiding among the asteroids. The swarm bioships, now alert to the danger, tried to detect and intercept them, but the rods were too small and moving too fast. They struck with devastating precision, punching through adaptive armor like it was paper. The largest bioship, a creature that had absorbed technology from 3 different Zephyrin dreadnoughts, suddenly broke apart as 5 rods hit it within milliseconds. The impacts released so much kinetic energy that nearby bioships were damaged by flying debris. Elena Morrison said with amazement, "It's working." They can't adapt to simple kinetic impacts. But Elena was not celebrating yet. She had studied the swarm's behavior patterns for months. They were incredibly intelligent and adaptive. They would not remain helpless for long. Third wave fire. All remaining kill vehicles full engagement. The remaining 4,000 tungsten rods launched simultaneously from their hidden positions throughout the solar system. They came from every direction. From the asteroid belt, from behind moons, from positions the swarm had never thought to check. The bioships tried desperately to escape, but they were caught in Earth's gravity well with no room to maneuver. Kinetic rounds slammed into them with the force of nuclear weapons. Holes that had resisted energy beams and harmonic disruptors were torn apart by simple metal rods. "Morrison," Elena said calmly. "Activate the mining charges." Captain Morrison grinned as he pressed a series of buttons on his console with pleasure. Throughout the inner solar system, thousands of chemical explosives detonated simultaneously. They had been hidden inside asteroids, space debris, and abandoned stations for months. The explosions were not intended to damage the bioships directly. They were designed to create a debris field of high-velocity fragments. The swarm bioships, already reeling from the kinetic rod attacks, suddenly found themselves flying through clouds of metal fragments, moving at tremendous speeds. Their hulls, adapted to resist sophisticated weapons, were shredded by simple pieces of steel and rock. "Elena," Dr. Chen called out excitedly. "Long-range sensors are detecting biohip retreat. They're trying to leave the system." Elena looked at the tactical display. The magnificent swarm fleet that had entered Sol's system so confidently was now a scattered collection of damaged and dying bioships. Hundreds had been destroyed outright. Others were badly damaged and struggling to regenerate. The survivors were indeed trying to flee. But Elena had planned for this too. "All remaining human vessels," she ordered, "begin pursuit operations. Do not let any bioship escape the system." 12 small human destroyers emerged from their hiding places behind Jupiter's moons. They were the same ships that had been dismissed at Kepler Prime, the primitive vessels that had been assigned to reconnaissance duty during the Galactic Fleet defeat. Now they moved to finish what the tungsten rods had started. The human ships were much smaller than the bioships, but they had advantages the swarm had never encountered. Their chemical engines produced no exotic energy signatures. Their steel hulls had no complex systems to be analyzed and copied. Their weapons were simple kinetic cannons that fired solid projectiles. Most importantly, their crews knew how to fight dirty. "This is Captain Rodriguez on the Defiance," came a voice over the communication channel. "We have 3 damaged bioships trying to escape toward Neptune. Moving to intercept." Elena watched as the human ships hunted down the survivors with methodical efficiency. They used tactics that were thousands of years old. Ramming attacks, close-range bombardments, and coordinated strikes that overwhelmed the bioship's ability to regenerate. The swarm creatures, accustomed to fighting advanced civilizations with predictable tactics, had no defense against an enemy that fought like ancient naval combatants. The bioships tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to except courage, determination, and the willingness to use simple weapons effectively. "Elena," Morrison said softly, "look at this." He pointed to a section of the tactical display where a single bioship was trying to send a transmission toward the edge of the system. Elena ordered the communication specialist to intercept and decode the signal. The message was brief and desperate. "Alert primary hive. Human species not primitive. Weapons incompatible with adaptation protocols. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment." Elena smiled grimly. The swarm was learning, but they were learning too late. "Jam that transmission," she ordered. "I don't want the rest of the swarm to know what happened here until we're ready for them." The battle in Sol's system continued for 6 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The mighty Void Swarm, conquerors of 12 advanced civilizations, were systematically destroyed by tungsten rods, chemical explosives, and kinetic cannons. When it was over, the space around Earth was filled with the drifting remains of bioships that had once seemed invincible. Not a single swarm vessel escaped to carry word of their defeat back to the hive. Elena stood in the observation deck, looking out at the debris field that had once been the galaxy's most feared enemy. Her simple notebook was filled with observations and calculations for the next phase of her plan. Elena Morrison said, joining her at the window, "The galaxy is going to want to know what happened here." Elena nodded. The other species would indeed want to know how humanity had achieved the impossible. They would want to learn about kinetic weapons and simple tactics. They would want to understand how primitive technology had succeeded where advanced civilizations had failed. But first, she had other plans. "Morrison, prepare a message to the galactic species. Tell them that Sol system is secure and that humanity is ready to assist in liberation efforts." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Liberation efforts?" Elena looked out at the stars where the rest of the Void Swarm waited, confident in their invincibility. They had consumed dozens of worlds and absorbed the technology of countless species. They believed they were unstoppable. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to play by the rules. "The swarm thinks they've learned everything there is to know about warfare," Elena said quietly. "They've adapted to energy weapons, exotic matter, and advanced tactics, but they've never faced an enemy that deliberately chooses to fight like barbarians." She closed her notebook and headed for the command center. There was work to do. The I-Galaxy was waiting to be liberated, and humanity had just proven that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on Kepler Prime exactly 1 week after the mysterious silence from Sol System had been broken. Representatives from the surviving species gathered in the same chamber where they had once dismissed humanity as primitive, but the mood was very different now. Admiral Kor of the Zetherian Empire stood at his podium, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. "Fellow beings," he began, his voice lacking its former confidence. "We have received confirmation that the Sol system engagement is complete. The Void Swarm force that entered human space has been eliminated." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Nexari representative, their crystal form flickering with disbelief, spoke first. "Eliminated? That is impossible. Our intelligence indicated over 3,000 bioships in that attack force. Human primitives could not have stopped even one of them." "Nevertheless," Admiral Kor continued, "long-range sensors confirmed the destruction of the entire swarm fleet. More significantly, we have received a transmission from Commander Vasquez." The chamber fell silent. Many had assumed the quiet human commander had died months ago. The idea that she had not only survived, but somehow defeated the swarm seemed impossible. Admiral Korth activated the main display. Elena's face appeared, looking exactly as she had during the original council meeting. Her expression was calm, her uniform neat, her demeanor unchanged. She sat at what appeared to be a simple metal desk with her notebook open beside her. "Greetings to the Galactic Council," Elena's recorded voice said. "I am pleased to report that the Void Swarm attack on Sol System has been successfully repelled. All enemy bioships were destroyed with no survivors. The threat to Earth has been neutralized." The representatives looked at each other in shock. General Grimjaw of the Thorak was the first to speak. "How is this possible? The swarm had adapted to defeat our greatest weapons. How did human primitives succeed where we failed?" Elena's image seemed to look directly at him. "General, the swarm's strength is also their weakness. They adapt to complex systems by analyzing and copying them, but they cannot adapt to solutions that have no complex systems to understand." She gestured to something off-screen. "We used kinetic weapons. Tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds. Chemical explosives hidden in debris fields. Conventional projectiles fired from simple cannons. The bioships had no sophisticated technology to analyze, because our weapons have no sophisticated technology." Dr. Kellen of the Ethereal Collective spoke, their energy forms shimmering with confusion. "But kinetic weapons are primitive. They were abandoned by advanced civilizations millennia ago. Elena nodded. Yes, they were abandoned because energy weapons seemed more efficient. But efficiency against conventional enemies is not the same as effectiveness against adaptive ones. The swarm had never encountered an enemy that deliberately chose ancient tactics. Admiral Kor leaned forward. Commander, what are your losses? How many ships did humanity sacrifice to achieve this victory? Our losses were minimal, Elena replied. We lost no ships and suffered no casualties. The engagement was conducted entirely according to plan. The silence in the chamber was complete. The idea that humanity had achieved total victory without losses while the combined galactic fleet had been destroyed was almost incomprehensible. The Nexari representative spoke again. Commander Vasquez, assuming your report is accurate, what do you propose for the liberation of occupied worlds? The swarm still controls dozens of systems throughout the galaxy. Elena consulted her notebook. I propose a coordinated campaign, using proven tactics. Humanity will provide technical specifications for kinetic weapon systems and simple defensive grids. We will also coordinate joint operations with surviving galactic forces. She looked up from her notes. However, such operations will require unified command structure and standardized tactics. The previous approach of each species fighting independently has been proven ineffective. General Grimjaw slammed his fist on his podium. You propose that we follow human leadership, that we abandon our advanced weapons for primitive rocks. Elena's expression did not change. General, I propose that you use whatever tactics achieve victory with minimum losses. If advanced weapons are effective against the swarm, by all means use them. But evidence suggests that simple solutions work better against adaptive enemies. Admiral Kor studied Elena's image carefully. Commander, you seem very confident in your assessment. What makes you certain that your tactics will work against the main swarm hive? Elena smiled slightly. Admiral, I have spent months studying swarm behavior patterns. They are incredibly intelligent and adaptive, but they think in predictable ways. They expect their enemies to use the most advanced weapons available. They prepare for complex tactics and sophisticated technology. She closed her notebook. The main hive has learned from every species they have conquered. They know how to counter plasma weapons, harmonic disruptors, energy shields, and exotic matter systems. But they have never encountered an enemy that deliberately fights like their ancestors did thousands of years ago. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in thoughtful silence. Representatives looked at each other, trying to process what they had heard. The quiet human who had been dismissed as primitive had not only survived, but achieved the impossible. Over the following days, more details emerged. Human courier ships arrived at various systems carrying detailed technical specifications for kinetic weapon systems. The designs were almost insultingly simple. Metal rods with basic guidance systems, chemical explosives with timer detonators, and projectile cannons that used conventional propellants. But they worked. The first test came when a small swarm scouting force approached the Nexari border worlds. Instead of using their traditional harmonic weapons, the Nexari followed human specifications and deployed kinetic kill vehicles. The results were devastating. Bioships that had previously been immune to Nexari attacks were destroyed by simple tungsten rods. Word spread quickly through the surviving galactic civilizations. The humans had found a solution that worked. More importantly, they were willing to share it freely with anyone who asked. 3 weeks after the Sol System battle, Elena herself arrived at Kepler Prime, aboard the destroyer Endurance. The station's docking master assigned her the same small bay she had used months earlier. But this time, representatives from every surviving species were waiting to meet her. Elena disembarked with the same small crew she had brought before. Captain Morrison carried her simple luggage while Elena held her notebook and datapad. They looked exactly as they had during the original council meeting. Unremarkable humans in plain uniforms. But now the corridor was lined with alien dignitaries waiting to greet them. Admiral Kor stepped forward first. Commander Vasquez, on behalf of the Zeperian Empire, I welcome you to Kepler Prime. We are honored by your presence. Elena nodded politely. Admiral, thank you for the warm reception. I trust your fleets are ready for the liberation campaign. Yes, Commander. We have converted 12 squadrons to kinetic weapons as you specified. Our engineers have studied your technical manuals extensively. General Grimjaw was next. The massive Thorak warrior bowed formally to Elena, something that shocked everyone present. "Commander, the Thorak clans request the honor of serving under your command. We have learned much about the value of simple tactics." Elena made a note in her book. "General, your enthusiasm is appreciated. I believe Thorak boarding tactics will be very effective against bioships that expect energy weapons." The Nexari representative approached with their crystal form, shimmering in respectful patterns. "Commander, the collective has prepared harmonic resonance maps of all known swarm positions. We await your strategic guidance." Elena looked at each representative in turn. These same beings had dismissed her as primitive months ago. Now they competed for her attention and approval. But Elelenane had not changed. She was still the quiet observer, still taking notes, still asking simple questions. "Thank you all for your cooperation," Elena said. "Shall we proceed to the planning session?" The council chamber had been reconfigured since Elena's last visit. The human section had been moved to the center of the chamber, with all other species arranged around it. Elena sat at a simple table, with her notebook open, while alien admirals and generals waited for her instructions. "The liberation campaign will proceed in 3 phases, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Phase 1 involves establishing kinetic weapon production facilities in secure systems. Phase 2 will focus on eliminating swarm scouting forces and isolating their main concentrations. Phase 3 will be direct assault on hive worlds using coordinated kinetic bombardment." She looked around the chamber. "Each phase will use simple tactics designed to exploit the swarm's dependence on adaptation. We will give them nothing complex to adapt to." Admiral Korath raised his hand. "Commander, our intelligence suggests the main hive contains billions of bioships. Even with kinetic weapons, how can we hope to defeat such numbers?" Elena consulted her notes. "Admiral, large numbers are actually a disadvantage for the swarm. They cluster their bioships together for mutual protection and resource sharing. This makes them vulnerable to area effect weapons." She stood and walked to the tactical display. "We will use asteroid bombardment, redirecting large space rocks toward hive concentrations. The kinetic energy of an asteroid moving at high speed is equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons. The bioships cannot adapt to being crushed by enormous masses." Dr. Kellen of the Ethereal Collective expressed confusion. "Commander, asteroid bombardment is a siege tactic from ancient warfare. Surely such primitive methods cannot succeed against advanced biohypips." Elena smiled. "Doctor, the swarm has spent so much time adapting to advanced weapons that they have forgotten how to defend against ancient ones. They expect their enemies to use the newest, most sophisticated technology available. They do not expect asteroids thrown like stones." The planning session continued for hours. Elena outlined tactics that were thousands of years old, but had been forgotten by spacefaring civilizations: ramming attacks, boarding actions, siege bombardments, and attrition warfare. Strategies that had no complex technology to analyze, and no sophisticated systems to counter. As the session ended, Admiral Kor approached Elena privately. "Commander, may I ask you a personal question?" Elena looked up from her notebook. "Certainly, Admiral. How did you know? How did you recognize that simple tactics would work when all our advanced strategies failed?" Elena considered the question carefully. "Admiral, humanity has a different perspective on warfare. Most species advance their technology and assume that newer is always better. But humans study history. We remember that wars are won by strategy, not just by weapons." She closed her notebook. "The galaxy species are very advanced, but they all think in similar ways. They all use energy weapons, force fields, and exotic matter systems. To the swarm, you are all variations on the same theme." Admiral Korth nodded slowly. "And humanity?" Elena walked toward the exit. "Humanity chooses to be different. We study our enemies and find their weaknesses, instead of trying to overpower their strengths. We use whatever works, regardless of how primitive it might seem." Over the following months, the liberation campaign proceeded exactly as Elena had planned. Human-designed kinetic weapons proved devastatingly effective against swarm bioships. Combined galactic fleets operating under human tactical doctrine achieved victory after victory. The swarm, adapted to counter every advanced weapon in the galaxy, found themselves helpless against tungsten rods, chemical explosives, and ramming attacks. Bioships that had seemed invincible were destroyed by tactics that predated spaceflight. The final battle took place at the main swarm hive in the Vega system. Elena commanded a fleet of over 5,000 ships from 12 different species, but instead of energy weapons and exotic technology, they carried kinetic kill vehicles and chemical explosives. The battle was not even close. Millions of bioships were destroyed by asteroid bombardments and kinetic strikes. The hive worlds themselves were shattered by coordinated ramming attacks using automated cargo ships filled with conventional explosives. The swarm's adaptation abilities, so effective against advanced weapons, were useless against simple mass and velocity. In the aftermath, as the last bioships drifted dead in space, Elena stood on the bridge of the Endurance and opened a communication channel to the combined fleet. All ships, this is Commander Vasquez. The Void Swarm has been eliminated. The galaxy is free. The celebration that followed lasted for days. Every species in the fleet honored Elena as the savior of galactic civilization. They offered her titles, rewards, and positions of authority that would have made her the most powerful being in known space. Elena politely declined them all. 6 months later, she returned to Kepler Prime for the final council session. The chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species, including many whose worlds had been liberated during the campaign. Elena sat at the same simple table in the center, with her notebook open as always. "Commander Vasquez," Admiral Korth said formally, "the Galactic Council wishes to express its eternal gratitude for your leadership during the Liberation campaign. Without your guidance, our civilizations would have been consumed by the swarm." Elena nodded politely. "The credit belongs to all species who participated in the campaign. Humanity simply provided an alternative perspective on warfare." General Grimjaw stood up. "Commander, the Thorak clans have voted unanimously to offer you leadership of our military forces. We would be honored to serve under your permanent command." Similar offers came from every species present. The Nexari offered to make her the supreme coordinator of their collective. The Zaphirans wanted to create a new rank of Grand Admiral specifically for her. Even the proud Ethereal Collective requested her guidance in restructuring their military doctrine. Elena listened patiently to each offer, making notes in her book. When they had finished, she stood up and looked around the chamber. "I am grateful for your confidence," she said simply. "But humanity's role in this campaign is complete. We have shared our tactical knowledge freely. The defense of the galaxy now rests with all of us working together." Admiral Korth frowned. "Commander, surely you understand that the galaxy still faces threats. Your leadership could ensure lasting peace and prosperity for all species." Elena smiled slightly. "Admiral, the greatest threat to galactic peace is the assumption that any one species has all the answers. Humanity succeeded against the swarm, not because we are superior, but because we think differently." She closed her notebook. "The galaxy is strongest when all species contribute their unique perspectives. My job was to provide humanity's perspective. When it was needed, that job is done." Dr. Kellen of the Ethereal Collective spoke urgently. "But Commander, what if new threats emerge? What if other enemies appear that require your strategic insight?" Elena looked around the chamber one final time. "Doctor, if new threats emerge, the galaxy now knows that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions. Sometimes simple tactics work better than advanced technology. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to fight by conventional rules." She gathered her belongings and headed for the exit. The galaxy has learned to think differently. That is humanity's greatest gift to galactic civilization. As Elena walked through the corridors of Kepler Prime for the last time, representatives from dozens of species followed her, still trying to convince her to accept a position of leadership. But Elena had made her decision. At the docking bay, Captain Morrison was waiting with the Endurance prepared for departure. "Elena," he said quietly, "are you sure about this? You could rule the galaxy if you wanted to." Elena looked back at the crowd of alien dignitaries watching her departure. "Morrison, ruling the galaxy was never the goal. Teaching the galaxy to think for itself was the Endurance, undocked from Kepler Prime and began its journey back to human space." Elena stood at the observation deck, watching as the station grew smaller among the stars. Behind her, The galaxy's species were already planning new defensive strategies based on human tactical principles. Elena opened her notebook and began writing. She had observed something important during the final council session. The galaxy's species were no longer simply copying human tactics. They were adapting them,